In this unit, we will be talking about trends, issues, and challenges in early intervention, which is one end of the continuum, and transition programs, which is the other end of the continuum. Let's begin by talking about what is early intervention. Early intervention, we must remember, is a system of services that helps babies and toddlers with developmental delays or disabilities. Early intervention focuses on helping eligible babies and toddlers, and these could be helping them learn basic and or brand new skills that typically develop during the first 3 years of life. These would include physical, cognitive, social, emotional, and or self-help skills. Early intervention is important for a number of reasons. One being that the neural circuits which create the foundation of learning are most flexible when the child is in their first 3 years of life. In other words, the brain is strengthened by the positive early experiences that are provided during those years, thereby enabling them to build the foundational skills of learning, behavior, and healthcare. Early social emotional development and physical health provides the foundation upon which the cognitive and language skills develop for a child. In fact, high quality early intervention services can change a child's developmental trajectory in big ways, thereby preventing them from struggling during later days of life. In addition, the interventions are likely to not only be more effective, but they are also likely to be less costly when provided earlier in life. Early intervention services are found to be essential because they provide the support that family needs in achieving achieving goals for their own kids. They promote generalized use of skills. They build and support the child's social competence and helps them develop in some key domains. And most importantly, they prevent the emergence of future problems or disabilities. Now let's spend some time talking about national and local issues in early intervention. There are a number of old practices that were followed, which included segregation, special education orientation, that there is a problem in the child that needs to be fixed, the isolate therapy, mass trial instruction. The instruction that was provided was highly structured. It was one-on-one instruction. Traditional methods of assessments were being used, and the focus was on skills and products, and all of this instruction was adult initiated. But as time passed, there were new practices that were put in place, which included inclusion, play-based orientation, there was activity-based intervention, there was blending of early intervention services. They were individualized and small group instruction. The assessment was happening in natural environments. There was a focus on interaction and process. Most of the instruction was child initiated and adult supported. Everyone played a collaborative and consultative role. It was very lightly structured. There was no one-on-one instruction. The focus was on small group instruction, and one-on-one instruction where absolutely required, and so forth. So we saw a huge shift between the old practices and the new practices. According to IDEA, there are certain requirements that every state should meet, and these include that they should assure that early intervention is available to every eligible infant or toddler in the state. There should be a designate or a lead agency to receive the grant and administer the program. There must be an appointment of an interagency coordinating council to advise the lead agency. And they also specified some minimum components of comprehensive statewide early intervention system that were required to be implemented, including operating a public awareness program and a referral system. However, there are still a number of unmet needs. More children are in the need of services than are currently being served. It is important that the children receive the services early on. There are racial disparities in the receipt of early intervention services, and young children experiencing homelessness are underrepresented in early childhood programs, and there is significant shortage of well-trained professionals and expertise in serving very young children with behavioral and emotional issues. So even though we saw that IDEA requires a number of basic requirements, there is a lot to be done to achieve those basic requirements. In the past few weeks, we've talked about IEP, which is the Individualized Education Plan for students between 3 to 21 years. Now, in this unit, we are going to be talking about the Individualized Family Service Plan, which needs to be put in place for students from birth to 3 years old. So the Individualized Family Service Plan or the IFSP is a process of looking at the strengths of the eligible child and family and developing a written plan to identify individualized supports and services that will enhance the child's development. And all of these details can be found in Part C of IDEA 2004. In other words, the IDEA is a dynamic planning tool. It is reviewed every 6 months or as frequently required, and the changes can be made to the IFSP as the child grows and develops. So unlike the IEP, which should be reviewed every 1 year, the IFSP must be reviewed every 6 months. There are several other ways in which an IFSP differs from the IEP. One, it revolves around the family, as it is the family that is constant in the child's life. So here we don't see a focus on the teachers, it is more on the family. It includes outcomes targeted for the family as opposed to focusing on the eligible child. So once again, the focus is on the family as opposed to the child alone. Just like in the IEP, there are a number of steps that lead to an effective IFSP. First of all, you have to identify family concerns, priorities, and resources. Early intervention should be seen as a system of services and supports available to the family to enhance their capacity to care for their children. In addition, the IFSP must identify the family's activity settings. Since all children develop as a result of their everyday experiences, it is important to document valued, enjoyable routines. Likewise, it is important to identify community activities or offer sustained engagement that lead to such learning opportunities. The next step that leads to an effective IFSP is a functional assessment, which is an effective assessment process that addresses the family's questions about enhancing their child's development. It collects information for a specific purpose. For example, the evaluation conducted by the early interventionist at the beginning of the IFSP process determines if the child is eligible for services. The functional assessment focuses on each family member's concern and priorities. The purpose of the functional assessment is to reflect on the child's strengths, the child's needs, the preferences for activities, the materials needed, the environment in which the child functions the most. The observations for the functional assessment are conducted in a setting that is familiar to the child. Example, it's being home, outdoor child care program, and so forth. And it is at the end of the assessment that the early interventionist determines whether or not the child is eligible for services. Just like the IEP has a team, there is a team put together to formulate the IFSP. The team works collaboratively to develop expected outcomes. So after the assessment is conducted, the team meets to review the information. They discuss the family concerns, the priorities and resources, and then it is then that they decide whether the child is eligible for having an IFSP. And if yes, they work together to collaborate on enhancing the family's capacity and increasing the child's participation in valued activities. And this is only possible because the IFSP is based on the comprehensive assessment that has been conducted by the early interventionist. So once the outcomes are identified, the early intervention teams assigns responsibilities for intervention services that support those outcomes. The IFSP requires an integrated team approach to intervention, and therefore it is very, very important for the entire team to work together collaboratively. In other words, we can say that for an IFSP, a transdisciplinary team model is followed. In this model, all team members, including the family, teach, learn, and work together to accomplish mutually agreed upon intervention outcomes. Therefore, the individual roles are defined by the needs of the situation rather than the function of a specific discipline. In this transdisciplinary model, one or a few people are primary implementers, whereas the other team members provide ongoing support, whether it be direct in the form of direct or indirect services such as consultation. Once it is determined that the child will have an IFSP in place, the strategies are identified to implement the plan. This step involves working closely as a team to increase the learning opportunities and to use the child's surroundings to facilitate learning. And they also identify reinforcers that best support the child's learning. The intervention strategies that are identified should help promote generalization of outcomes. It is very, very important that a skill that a child learns in one settings, they also know how to generalize it in other settings. It helps the child to become more independent in his or her own world. They are provided within natural environments so that it is not overwhelming for the student. They emphasize the acquisition of functional competencies. They make it possible to increase child's participation within the environments, and they include both social and non-social activities. Like in an IEP, both ongoing and periodic evaluations are essential to any early intervention program. The evaluation may focus on the child's progress in obtaining the desired outcomes and also upon the quality of the program in itself. Ongoing monitoring of child's progress requires to keep records in a systematic manner so that any critical questions about the outcomes or the progress can be answered. Periodically reviewing the IFSP means sharing the results on the child's progress with the team. In terms of the timeline, according to Part C of IDEA, the IFSP must be evaluated and revised annually, and periodic reviews should be conducted every 6 months. Every IFSP team appoints a service coordinator that helps support the family's participation throughout the planning and development process, and the IFSP must be created within 45 days of the family's first contact expressing their concern. Once again, as discussed earlier, the IFSP document must state the present level of the development of the child, including the strengths, interests, and areas of concern, the family's concerns and priorities and resources as they relate to the enhancing and development of the infant or toddler must be included. And it must include a statement of the major outcomes or goals expected to be achieved for not only the child but also the family. Any supports and services that are put in place to achieve the goals must match the family's culture and interest. They should make use of any learning opportunities throughout the day and in places where the family spends most time. So, once again, the family's cultural heritage and their interests should be at the forefront. In addition to the goals and services, a plan for transition must be included in every IFSP. The service coordinator must initiate this plan at least 6 months before the child's third birthday. Therefore, very similar to what a transition plan would look like in an IEP, this one is more for children who are about to become 3 years of age and would basically be making a transition from an IFSP and to, if required, an IEP.